commissioners. And I have the pleasure of working with her. Um, or I'm sorry, did I get that wrong, Melanie?
You did get it wrong. It's Royal Oak City Commission.
City Council, sorry. I want to elevate you, Melanie. But I have the pleasure of working with Melanie um, in my position at the Secretary of State's office as a fierce advocate for voting rights. And we invited Melanie today to talk about local advocacy. One of the things that we heard from the leagues across the state when we did our survey this summer is how do we advocate on a local level? And I was talking to Melanie about something a few months ago, and I was like, I wanted to interact with somebody about this. She's like, well, I could do that. I was like, well, perfect. We will invite you to come and meet with our members. So without further ado, Melanie, I will turn it to you. I know that we have a few questions for you, but feel free to, if you want to introduce yourself in a better way, and I will pass it to you.
Yes, no problem. And my fault for not sharing a bio with you, so you could give it more accurately. So I served on the Royal Oak City Commission for the past 8 years. I just rolled off actually this last November. I didn't run for re-election this last time. Too many fun things happening for put so much attention on that at this point. I think Royal Oak's kind of moving along nicely. But I've been in the advocacy space for a long time prior to that, and also, as Keela mentioned, in my professional work, I work for Promote the Vote, and we're also a nonpartisan organization that does advocacy work. So I did put together a few slides. I don't know if it's, yeah, let's see if I can share those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I apologize if it's not at the right level, if it's too basic. I'll try to speed through, but I just put together some thoughts on like what it looks like to advocate locally, and some ideas for how to make that happen. I'm not super familiar with how the league would approach this in a different way, maybe than a regular advocacy group. So I'm curious to hear how your thoughts on that, and we'll incorporate those as much as I can into my presentation. So let me see if I can share here. All right, so advocating locally. So local advocacy is really important. I know that a lot of the league work focuses on the state and national level, but a lot of decisions that are really close to what people care about and where they live happens at the local level. So many decisions about your daily life, in fact, a lot of the things you think about do in fact happen there. And local officials are really accessible, often more accessible than state or federal officials, because they live in the community that you live in. They're concerned about the same issues. You might share friends, you might know the same people. And getting that local advocacy right can shape the policies, the budgets, and the implementation, even if they're set at a higher level. So sometimes there's a state law that's set, but the implementation will be happening at the city or township level. And so if you bring it down there, then you can actually have an impact on where those dollars are going and how they're being spent. And the way that we have our system set up in Michigan, there's a lot of authority that gets passed down from, many decisions happen at the state, but a lot of things are passed down to the county level, a lot of health related things on the county level, on the city level, everything that's happening that's the infrastructure of where you live. The budget may come from the states, but how it's spent is being decided at the city level or the township level. And school districts. And so school districts and cities are separate, and that's one thing that people get confused about a lot, like approaching their city council with questions or concerns when really it's a school district issue, and the city doesn't play into that. So that's the first important step, is to identify who your local elected officials are. So here in Michigan, we have cities or townships. So some number of council members, or in Royal Oak we call ourselves commissioners. I don't know why. And then there's a mayor, strong or weak depending on the city. So a strong mayor is like a full-time, does the actual work of governing. And then in a weak mayor system, they're really sort of like a member of the council, but they run the meetings and they have a slight additional authority, but there's usually a city manager in place who will do the majority of the work. So in Detroit, you see that we have a strong mayor. Here in Royal Oak, we have a weak mayor. So a city manager is the one who does most of the daily administration work. And knowing that distinction is kind of important, because the city manager is actually not elected, but often the most impactful person that you can go to about the decisions that are happening and what's going on in the local level. And then there are county commissioners, which I'm not a county commissioner, but we have a lot of interaction with them because of how the Michigan system is set up. That we there's some partnerships that happen between the city and the counties, and the counties and the states, and so a lot of those interactions are happening, and people tend to ignore the county system because they don't quite understand how it works. So people know what's happening in the city and they have some sense of what's happening in the state, but then they forget that there's this layer in between that actually does a lot of things. And in some cases, like in Oakland County, has a huge budget. So there's a lot that can be done by interacting with your county commissioners. And we're all drawn to have a single county commissioner, but then there's also a county executive. And so because they are closer to the people, these people are more likely to be keyed into what the same things that the local community is thinking about, and are easier to kind of get in contact with. A lot of times at the state level, I'm sure you know, when you set up in-person meetings, those in-person meetings end up being with a staffer, which is great. The staffers are amazing, but the county commissioners and the city and townships level, you're more likely to be able to actually meet with the person themselves and have a conversation and start to build that relationship. Sheriff, prosecutor, clerk, treasurer, again, these are things like we know that we have these at the county level, but it's sometimes we forget that there's someone who was elected by us and that we can talk to them about what our concerns are, and they are setting policies as well. And school board members. This is another one that there's been a lot of focus on this actually nationally, as some school related, education related policy issues have kind of bubbled up on the partisan side. So there's been a lot of talk about this, but it varies widely. Even in Michigan, there's some school boards where when the election comes up, there's only the slate of candidates that fit the number of spots there are, and other times there are really hotly contested races. So knowing who represents you is pretty important. I want to note that in some cities, they're divided into wards, like in Detroit. So you have a district, so you're represented by a single person, and then in other cities like Royal Oak, you're at large. So all of the 6 commissioners and the 1 mayor for Royal Oak represent the entirety of Royal Oak. We aren't divided into neighborhoods like some cities are, like Ann Arbor or Detroit. So once you know who your elected officials are, it's important to understand like what they actually do. So are they part of the decision-making body, and what kind of decisions are they making at that level? So you can look at the posted agendas, you can show up at a meeting. It's really interesting, actually, I think for first timers to go and see what's on the agenda and how things are being dealt with at a local level, because we don't really have a great sense of the things that are happening at a local level if we're not keyed in. But there's a lot of work that's being done, and that directly impacts people and communities that you don't know that they're happening there, and you sort of tend to vaguely blame the government. Probably not something you have a problem with here at the League, but just generally that people aren't aware of how it works. And what are they doing? What do they do specifically in their role as policymakers? Like, are they the policymakers? Are they doing the work of implementation? So a city clerk would administer the elections, but the city council is setting the budget for those elections. And the city clerk has to go, if the city clerk wants more things, they have to go ask the city council for them. So if you're, worried about election access or polling place, you can talk to the city clerk, but know that they are constrained as well by what their budget they're receiving from the city council. And a county commission could create a housing fund like Oakland County did. And that housing fund could be used for many different things. And they have an idea when they create the policy or they create the fund what it's going to do. But then when you get down to brass tacks, there's administrators there who are doing the implementation. And so reaching out and talking to the administrators may be more effective than going back to the county commission and saying like, wait, hey, this isn't working the way I thought it would work. So realizing what level you at, are you trying to get them to set policy, or are you trying to get them to implement policy in a particular way, may impact who you want to be reaching out to. Identifying relevant issues probably isn't a problem that you have, but it is maybe interesting to think about how the policies would break down from state level, which I think you probably have a good understanding of how they set policies that you're interested in, and to the city level. My guess is that most of the things that would be interesting for the League people to be advocating for in the local level are probably policies that are actually set at the state level, but then are like trickle down to the cities to implement. So I'm not totally sure about that, but that's sort of my guess on how that goes, because a lot of the things that happen at the city level, like there are policies that are set there, there are local ordinances that are in place, but a lot of times also it's just doing the work that comes from is set by state law. So election administration, and I already mentioned that about clerks, local funding priorities, how we spend our money in the city, zoning, housing, and land use. We've seen a lot of interest in this recently. So one of the best examples we've seen recently of local advocacy having a real impact is on those data centers. So they're trying to put data centers in at various spots around the states, and the residents are not interested in having these data centers. They've been banding together, coming up at public comment, and they're using zoning laws for the most part on both sides to either argue, this is illegal or this isn't illegal, and the zoning is set at the city level. So these zoning laws in Howell Township, they put a moratorium on doing any kind of rezoning for data centers until they've kind of reviewed their ordinances. And so they're using zoning as like a tool. So knowing how that works, it's maybe not something that people who didn't want a data center next to their house thought they would have to learn about, but learning about it is how they're going to be able to be impactful in having these conversations. It's one thing to say, I don't want a data center next to my house, I don't like it. It's another thing to say, I'm concerned about public health and safety and my family's health living next to this. I'm concerned about the water supply, and you can't do this because the zoning doesn't allow it unless you grant a waiver, and you shouldn't grant the waiver. So putting all that together is really the trick in having an impactful argument, by sort of marrying the cause and what you are concerned about and how it would impact the local community with the actual ability that the elected official or administrator has to turn the knob. Like, what can they do? Sometimes there's nothing that can be done to stop, because there's no law in place. People have private property, they can do what they want. But so knowing what the relevant issues are and how they play out in the local jurisdiction are really critical to being able to craft an argument that could be a winner. And then matching it to the right level of government. So this is a really huge issue. Not every issue belongs at every level. So we at the Royal Oak City Commission would have people come, and they would complain about things, and they speak at public comment, and we don't usually respond to public comment. That's not really how it works, but it's sort of this frustrating thing when they would come and tell us that they were really upset that there wasn't busing in Royal Oak schools, and we aren't in charge of busing in Royal Oak schools, or they're upset about they're not getting free school lunches, and that they are making that decision. That decision was being made at the state level. So all of these issues that not every issue that you care about can go to every piece of government. I think you know that already, but it is, you'd be surprised how many times there's a mismatch between someone who's coming to advocate for something they care about and the level of government that they're trying to advocate at. And there is, as I've mentioned, often state law that limits or guides what local action can do. So if you want to be a really effective advocate, you're looking at the right official at the right time, you have a specific ask, and it's within their scope of authority and within the law. And then the other thing for local politics, this matters at the state level, you know this already, but it matters even more at the local level, and it's often ignored. So what's happened in the past and what decisions have been made can explain what's happening right now. And if you don't know that, then you're very unlikely to be successful. The first example that came up for me when I started as a city commissioner 8 years ago is one of my neighbors is like, Royal Oak bans fire pits, and I want a fire pit. Why can't we have fire pits? And I was like, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, why shouldn't we have fire pits? And so then I, brought it to my fellow commissioners, and they all kind of like, oh my gosh, we've had this conversation 1,000 times. Like, here's the story about fire pits. Like, there's people who are on oxygen. It has really caused breathing problems. It's impossible to contain. Anyway, there was this whole history to this discussion that I, coming as Johnny come lately, like, oh yeah, this is a good idea, but in fact, this is something that they've looked at quite a bit. Another example we have in Royal Oak is busing, which again is a school, not a city issue, but every new generation of parents can't believe we don't have buses in Royal Oak. still can't believe it myself. And advocate for it at the school board level. And the school board has looked into it and the budget constraints and how it's operated in the past. People weren't really using the busing system when it did exist. So getting that context is what will allow you to be making the arguments that people are ready to listen to. If they've heard the argument 1,000 times before and you just aren't aware of what the responses are, you're just kind of banging your head against a wall. So really getting the local context is critical, especially in local matters. Because there tends to be a much longer institutional history locally than there would be maybe at the higher levels. And then learn how local government works. Again, I don't know how much of a problem this is for the league itself, but understanding the process is important as understanding the policy. And that's just, I think you probably know that already. Like, Junior League does stuff for the state all the time. But if you don't, if you're talking to someone who has no control over the agenda, then it's maybe a nice conversation, but it's not going to move you anywhere. So, looking at how the agendas work, local government works a lot like state government, but not entirely. And it's certainly much more open, accessible to public input, including that there are committees, advisory committees, or sometimes active boards in every city and township. So if there's some issue that you're particularly concerned about, and this is also true within school boards, school districts also have these local boards and committees. And probably the best way to start to figure out what's going on is to join these boards and committees and just get on one. It's usually one night a month that you are spending time learning about how the city government works, and being able to put your voice in with your other community members. Because building that up, coming from a committee member who's part of the community, you start to know all the faces. You start to be kind of in this inner circle of people who have influence and are speaking the same language about how city government works. Public comment is useful and important. Certainly, these are all subject to the Open Meeting Act if there's any decisions being made, and so public comment is allowed at these meetings and welcome. Really helpful, usually to local officials, and they're much more likely to be impacted because it's fewer votes to get elected when you're a local elected official. So every vote matters more to you, and you really it's hard to kind of separate when there's two sides going. If you hear only from one side, it's hard to remember that these are the people who are passionate at this point, and there's still another 100,000 people out there that you're representing that may have a different opinion. So public comment can be really impactful. I would say it's especially impactful if you get together with other people with shared interests who are coming to say the same thing, and it can be pretty quick. Like, you don't have to make a huge speech. Just say who you are and why this matters to you and what you think they should do. And then other people who are there with the same cause can come and say, I echo those comments, and I also feel that this would be important for this reason. So it's pretty easy, and it can be really useful in swaying opinion. And that's what we saw with these data centers, is that people were flooding these public meetings, and they were having their own meetings and kind of coming well prepared with their arguments. And it changed the course of these data centers. I mean, we'll see, but at least temporarily, they have sort of halted the data centers in several places. And then also what happens after a vote. A lot of times it's unclear when the local electeds are voting on something, is this the final decision? Is it over now? Or is there another stop point? So kind of watching how the process goes. And this is something you could reach out to the administrators about. Just find out, like, the building official, like, hey, what does it mean that they approved this? Is this happening right away? Or is there another hurdle? So the process is long and a little bit complicated, but once you're in it, it sort of seems like the flow that you become very familiar with. So again, I just think getting involved with the committee or board, if you can, is a really good way to get to know people and to be impactful. I think I said all this already. Decisions happen in public meetings. And if you go to even if you're not on the committee, going to the committees that are dealing with the issues you care about, they're likely to have a much more robust discussion than is going to happen at the higher level, because they're deep into it. They know, they're kind of the experts. Even if it's something like parks, you can be an expert on parks just by being a parent. They'll be having the robust discussions, and then they send a recommendation up to the city council. And so you might think that the city council kind of gives short shrift to some of these discussions because it seems like they don't get into it, but that's because that discussion already happened at a lower level. So being there for that first discussion can really turn the tide even more than later on in the process. And then following up after meetings is really important. So if a decision's been made, like saying, hey, thank you for doing this, or like, oh, I didn't agree with you here, but I'm curious to hear what the next steps are, or what else can be done. It's like, this is a networking, like all politics, all decisions, right? So local elected officials are closest to communities just by definition. Many of us are serving part-time. Most of us, I think, are serving part-time, and we really rely on like what our friends and neighbors are telling us. So if you're one of those friends and neighbors and you have the ear of several the commissioners, then you suddenly become your own lobby group. In-person meetings are really common and welcome. So reaching out and asking to meet with someone, it's like I said, it's much easier at the local level. And face-to-face conversations carry weight. Local electeds are out in the community, and people stop us in the grocery store, but also like at events, at city events. Here at Royal Oak, we have Arts, Beats, and Eats. I run into a lot of people out there and to hear what they say about everything that they think about Royal Oak. And any of these times you can get a group together. So neighborhoods that come together, usually about local development, but parent groups, faith groups, any kind of community organization, we know who they are already, so they have built-in credibility. So if you're part of one of those organizations, you can leverage that in front of these other in front of the elected officials by saying, this is my faith group, or this is my I'm part of the Optimist Club, and they know already, like, oh, okay, like I know X, Y, and Z in that group, and I know what they do. So it's really getting into the inner circle is much easier at the local level than it is at the state level, but it remains like a very important way to get attention. And yet those relationships build over time. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. A lot of these officials go on to the state legislature. So if you build a relationship when they're local, you have their phone number for when they get to the state house. So this can be, I think, a really useful tool in just kind of building your own network for advocacy purposes. And don't be afraid to share your own area of expertise. Sometimes if you talk to a local elected and you're talking about something totally different, but then you tell them like, well, I'm an accountant, or whatever, then later they might call on you if they have a question about something that comes in front of them. So you become a resource for them as well. And don't give up even if you disagree. I had one of my biggest thorns in the side, I would say, is also a pretty good friend of mine now. So we didn't agree really on policy. We didn't agree on how to spend money, but she was always respectful to me, and I was to her too. And so she always had my ear. So even if I knew that a lot of times we weren't going to agree on policy, when she would bring something to my attention, I took it seriously and would listen carefully. So it doesn't entirely matter, especially at the local level, which is supposed to be nonpartisan for the most part. It doesn't matter if you disagree on policy, you can still form those relationships and have an impact. All right, so let's trying to kind of speed through this. Our key takeaways: focus on your own officials who actually have the authority to do what you're asking. Choose issues that make sense for local action, and think about how those decisions are going to be made before you engage. And then just be strategic and respectful. And I do think that local advocacy is kind of critical in community building, and is critical in really having the impact that you want, even if you're mostly focused on some state policy issues. That trickles down to the local level more than you would think. And so there are ways to be impactful, and I encourage you to get involved. I'm gonna stop my share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melanie. That was fantastic. During your presentation, I was made aware that we have another elected official, a current elected official with us, one of our own. So Tracy, do you have anything that you want to chime in? Let me see if I can spot where did she go.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm trying to find her. She might have dropped off. Well, does anybody have any questions for Melanie?
Well, I'm curious to know, first of all, thank you for your service to your community and all those years of hard work. I know that that's hard to have a constant barrage of ideas and questions and input and opinions that we don't always agree with, but listening and doing that. And I'm sorry, I'll turn my video on so you can see me too. Um, so you say you didn't rerun to be reelected. What are you doing now?
So great question. So it's been 8 years. So when I was first elected, I had little younger kids and I was working part-time only. Now I'm working full-time and I've got one kid in college, one kid in high school, and one kid in middle school.
Wow.
So like the sort of the landscape of my life has changed quite a bit. And in terms of what I have time for, I mean, I will say what drove me to run when I first went was the 2016 election. And so that I think drove a lot of women into politics, and I felt it was really important to kind of make an impact. So this is all a long build up to answer your actual question, which is that I've started to feel at this point that the impact that I was having wasn't the best marriage of what my interests and skills were at this point in my life. Like I did think it was important, but I started to feel like the Royal Oak City Commission was like we were all kind of saying the same things all the time, and so my voice wasn't as necessary there. And I also feel like what the world is craving right now is more connection. So I really want to be building community, and I thought that city commission is a useful way to do that, but there's ways I can build community better outside of that. So it's only been a month since I've been off, and so I have not quite figured out what I'm doing. But for example, I'm getting more involved in the schools, so I'm going to be PTA president next year, and I'm on the diversity committee for the school district, been on that for some time and sort of taking more of a leadership role. And I'm also just finding ways to get people together. So I'm looking at putting together a book club for my middle schooler, and I'm looking at putting together a Friday night kind of mom's club for friends around here. I'm working on building community. So I'm looking for ways to do that and taking suggestions if you have them. But that's what I feel like we're lacking right now in our world.
I love that. Thank you. What was your background before running for office? I mean, to jump into city commission is kind of a big leap. I mean, people run for all these different offices and positions and don't get there. Like they keep trying and trying again. And it sounds like you jumped in with both feet and you were able to be successful at being elected.
So I'm a lawyer, like
Okay.
all politicians,
Okay.
right? But also I've been very engaged in the political. I never thought I would run. It had never literally occurred to me for 1 second until that election happened. But I had helped others to run, and I had been involved in politics. So I had kind of been watching, and I had been an advocate. I was a legal aid attorney, so I um, worked with families and was pretty concerned about how social policy was set. So but I will say it's a huge learning curve. Like, regardless, it's a huge learning curve stepping into that space. And I had some great mentors who helped. I certainly did not know what I was doing. I thought I did, but I did not. So you learn as you go, and it's nice to have people who help.
So
Okay,
thanks for the
question. What?
question, Sarah. Tracy, wait a
Can you
minute,
hear me
I
now?
lost her. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, good. So I mirror pretty much everything that Melanie just said, other than because I'm a township, we are not nonpartisan. I know our village, we have a village in our township, they can just run and they don't have to declare a party. You can do that at the township level, but it's a real pain to get on the ballot that way. So that is one difference. My plea with everybody always in this position is to not wait till there's a problem to come find us, especially since we're always in your neighborhood. We're always at the grocery store, like she said. Well, we don't have a grocery store, but we're always somewhere. Um, so don't wait till there's a problem to come and meet us or, find out what the meetings are like or which committee or group within the municipality runs things because it's way easier to come and know the people and express your frustration with things that are going on when you don't wait until you're mad to meet them.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Tracy. Let's see if I can spotlight both of you. Just in case there are questions, since you're here with us. Um, there was a question in the chat, but as I pull that up, I'm a thing that I'm curious about, and either one of you can answer, is that I find it to be weird and interesting on the public comment that you just receive the information but don't actually respond. Just culturally, just, in dialogue wise, it's very weird just to kind of throw ideas into the ether and not hear an immediate response. Is there a particular reason that happens? Because that I've seen that, visiting Ann Arbor and watching other folks meetings, and that is a common place. So is there a particular rationale for that, Melanie or Tracy? Do you all know?
I mean, it's to keep the meeting on track, basically, because you can get super derailed because people will show up to public comment. I totally get that it's frustrating, and we actually fail at it sometimes. Like sometimes we do respond, so you can't not. And we have our community engagement super coordinator present at the meeting. So if it's something that's like we know the answer to, but we don't want to spend the whole meeting talking about this person's problem with their neighbor, we direct them to the community engagement uh, coordinator to talk about it. But so at these meetings, people they can say anything, right? So if they wanted to say something that was specific to the agenda, in theory, when we get to that point in the agenda, we'll talk about whatever they say. And you usually, for the most part, you see that. Like when we're taking notes up there and someone says like, I don't understand why this developer did X. Then when the developer comes up, we're like, hey, by the way, why did you do this? So it does happen that way, but it can be frustrating for people because it's like you have to wait for the whole time for them to get to that point. So I've heard, I don't know if this occurs elsewhere, but I've heard suggested that you could like take public comment for each issue, right? So like before an agenda item comes up, be like, okay, anybody got comment on agenda item 4? And then you can have the discussion right then. But it does, I can see how that would kind of make the meeting a little messy. So, and I will say that most of the public comment we get most of the time is from the same people known to us, usually who don't like us and are coming to air their complaints. So it's, I wouldn't make sense to respond to them every time. And it also would not be fair, right? Right. Like our friends come up and we'll tell them something, but then the people who come up and yell at us and we don't respond. So yeah, I think it's just mostly to keep order. Tracy, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
The way I usually describe it to people is that it's a business meeting technically, and it's not a town hall. So while we offer those times for public comment, and we can use that information, and possibly during like or like member comments, sometimes we will answer those like at the end of the meeting if a member of the board has something that they can respond to. That's usually at the end, but the fact that it's a business meeting and not a town hall is usually the way I describe it to people so that they understand that it's not, we're not just there to hear what they have to say. We're there to manage business for the community.
Interesting. Thank you. I didn't think about it in that kind of a way. I appreciate both of you. Renee has a question from Melanie. What has been the most difficult or politically unpopular decision you've had to make, and how did you communicate that to the public?
Well, we got, people were yelling at us recently about sheets, but I don't think that was not actually that difficult. I
Sheets,
think
the gas station.
she's the guy. We have one coming to Rural, God forbid.
Oh, nice.
And I think it's going to be the marijuana. So when I was like, look, the voters voted for marijuana this marijuana ordinance. We should get it passed. We should get people in place. The process took forever. It took forever. And then when we finally got, and it was our city manager who like reviewed the applications and then recommended whatever, the three that came. And one of the ones that were recommended was within 100 feet of our technical campus for our schools. And in our ordinance, we had said it had to be like 1,000 feet away from a school. And then they were trying to be like, but it's not a school because it's like a trade kind of thing. And I was like, seems like a school to me. So, and so let me be clear, I'm not like, oh God, anti-marijuana, I shouldn't have marijuana. But I mean, we said it should be within 1,000 feet of a school. And so I think it shouldn't be within 1,000 feet of school. And I think this is a school. So I don't know if it was unpopular or not, because but I was the lone vote against it. So our commission is nonpartisan, but for the majority of the time I've been down there, we're all Democrats and we all know it. So a lot of the votes we have are pretty unanimous, but and so these are all, everybody's in favor of the marijuana establishments. No one's trying to vote them down, but I was the lone vote against that, putting that specific one at the school, or not at the school, near the school. And so it was hard actually to turn against the tide of it's hard to be the one, like, these are all my friends, and I trust them, and I don't want to tell them I think they're doing it wrong. It's not easy. So I talked to a lot of people, and then I had a pretty active Facebook presence, and that's actually part of the reason I don't want to do this anymore, because Facebook is so toxic. But I had a pretty active Facebook presence, and Royal Oak is a really Facebook-y community. I don't know why, but we have these Facebook groups and a lot of people are on them. And so that's where I did most of the communication of what I was thinking about, what my decision was, and like how I arrived there. And for the most part, people understood. And it's funny because I was very much aligning in this case with the anti-marijuana group, because they were trying to stop all the marijuana establishments, and specifically this one. And so they were all very pleased with me in this. And I, wasn't trying to make lifelong friends that way. But that I think was the hardest one. And I think my communication was mostly through Facebook, but I did also, like, at each meeting, you have the opportunity to say what your piece is. And a lot of times, my theory, I don't like to grandstand. So if someone has already said the same thing that I'm going to say, I'm like, okay, that's good. That's same, ditto. But in this case, I had to speak about, what my thought was, and it was critical of my other commissioners, which I did not feel great. But it was a pretty crowded public comment, a pretty crowded public that day. And we had a lot of comments on marijuana establishments. So I would say that was probably my hardest decision, or felt like the hardest one. And I largely communicated in advance through Facebook, but not too much in advance, because it was kind of down to the wire. I was getting a lot of pressure. And then at the meeting itself. And it is in there, in case that's not obvious from the fact that I was the lone vote against it.
Awesome. Any other questions for Melanie? Sarah said she was proud of you for stating to the truth of your convictions.
Thanks. It's hard. It is something that I learned again over time. It's one of the things that when you go in, you're like, oh, well, all these smart people think this, I'm just going to do that too, even though it doesn't feel right. But you don't get any points for that. You should do what you think is right.
I will let you go, but I can't let you go before we talk just a little bit about this year's election. It would be very weird and very bad if I let you go before we do that. Because of the great work that you do. I've been talking to our members that this year is going to be robust, is what the word that I keep using. I don't think it does it justice, but if you want to take maybe 3 to 5 minutes just to talk about how do we as leagues need to orient ourselves to get ready for this monster year, because I think it's going to be a behemoth. So
yes, totally agree. This is going to be a behemoth year, especially in Michigan. So, I mean, Michigan is always important every time national elections roll around. We know that. But this year, because we have so many of those big spots open. And if you're reading the papers, this is the first time it's ever happened that we've had all of these huge statewide races happening at once. So yes, buckle up. And I think we're at Promote the Vote, we're really concerned about making sure that elections run smoothly, just like Gila is. And the concern is not so much like, oh, these are big elections, like politically they're going to be important and matter a lot, but also it's going to matter that the elections stand and everyone believes in them and believes in the integrity of our elections, and that the process is working, and that these people are doing the right thing and working hard. And it is really scary to me personally and professionally, the attacks that we've seen on the election system. Here in Michigan, we have, I think, the most, or at least one of the most decentralized election systems in this country, because we run elections at the local level. So most places run them at like the county level. We run them at the local level. So that means we have over 1,500 county or city and township clerks who are administering elections. It's hard to make fraud happen in 1,500 people. Like, you can barely get them in a room together. So our Michigan elections have built-in integrity, actually, and our processes are robust, and we have great election laws, and they're complicated. Like, people make mistakes. I'm not saying errors never happen, but making sure that people understand how elections work, that we have all of these checks and balances all the way through on our elections, from the voter rolls in advance to who's voted on each day. And these election officials are working hard. I think spreading the word about how great Michigan elections are is important, because people, when they hear something that, like, oh, there was fraud, or there was, someone stole a voting machine, it's like you don't know what that means, and you start to wonder. So I think getting involved in your elections, I would really encourage you. If you're not election inspectors, probably this is a group of people who tend to be election workers, but it's so interesting. It's actually fun and interesting. It's a long day. Early voting is not that long, so you can do early voting, work in early voting. You get paid, you learn so much, and it helps you, I think, to be a good ambassador for our elections, and to let people know that Michigan elections are trustworthy and well done. And when they say who the winner is, that's who the winner is. So I encourage you to get involved. I agree, this is going to be a mammoth year. I'm a little nervous. I'm also excited. Elections are fun. It's good, important work. This is our democracy. This is our democracy at work, and we should be supporting it every way we can.
Thank you. You knocked that out the park for me. Appreciate it. I really appreciate you spending a little time on a Saturday morning with us, Melanie, and giving us some great tips. Whenever you get a chance, we would love to have your PowerPoint presentation so that we could disseminate it to the members who may not have been with us. And we typically put our trainings on our YouTube page, so I'll talk to you about that, make sure you're okay with that. But yeah, really grateful and looking forward to a very long and interesting year working with you as we get ready for these 4 elections this year.
I'll see you again soon.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, and Melanie, if you are still looking for community, the Junior League of Birmingham is right up the road, and I'm sure they would love to have you. So we have a lot of folks from the Junior League of Birmingham here on the call. So they're right in, they're your neighbors as well. So consider us.
I am interested. I spent time looking at the page because before this meeting, so I'm interested. So you may be hearing from me.
Awesome, fabulous. Thank you. Have a good one.